Hello, seekers and knowers. Welcome to the Gnostic Viewpoint. My name is Asha, and today we're going to be talking about
the biblical suppression of the Queen of Heaven. This topic is super important to me. Um, I was raised as a Christian, like most people in American society, and I went through a spiritual awakening that began in 2008. But before I could really kick off that spiritual awakening, I was brought back into the Bible as a Hebrew Israelite for a couple of years, which I already know the shame of having been a Hebrew Israelite, so we don't have to get into it. No offense to any current Hebrew Israelites. But during that time, the good thing that I did do that, or I did take that time, because it allowed me to truly, truly, truly study the Bible, inside and out. Hebrew words, verses, staying up all night, comparing scriptures. I mean, into I was really into it. A lot of studying of a lot of things. So now that I can look back on my life, I can see why I needed that time as a Hebrew Israelite to um to really put me in a direction of where I kind of am now, to really just tear this whole shit apart from the inside out. So that's what this channel is about. That's what most of my videos are going to be about. Spirituality, Gnosticism, studying everything, all kind of different ancient traditions. I wrote a book about this back in 2013 called The Serpent of Shakti. It's still available on Amazon on Kindle if you are interested. But basically, I like to go into the spirituality of many different cultures, and I like to compare and look at the esoteric and the occult side of it. So that's what this video is really about as well. We are talking about the Queen of Heaven as she shows up in this Bible, the feminine energy as it shows up in this Bible, and how it's the colonialism that is practiced in this Bible was used to suppress women, to demonize the feminine energy, particularly in North Africa, Northeast Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, which was Canaan at one point in time, and why they went about taking over that area and completely eradicating the feminine worship that was going on in that area by the black African people that were there. Um so they wanted that power, they wanted those resources. It was called the Fertile Crescent. And it is the center, pretty much the center of the world in so many ways. The way the map is depicted, it is the center of the way that we view this world. um so to have that area and to be able to influence from that area has been amazingly successful for the Judeo-Christian Islamic religions that are all derived from the same deity, that deity being Yahweh, um El, God, Allah. These are all derived from the same God. The Bible actually speaks on that. We of course know Israel and the Hebrew people are depicted in the primarily the Old Testament, also known as the Tanakh. And the New Testament gives the story and the rise of Christianity, but we also have has Islam's roots found in Abraham, the founding father of the Israelites. Um, you'll hear Hebrew Israelites talk about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You have Abraham, his son Isaac, and Jacob. But before he had Isaac, he had a son named Ishmael by his maid servant Hagar, because he thought his wife Sarah was too old to have children. They had given up hope in the God of the Bible, giving them that. And so they went and he went and impregnated Hagar, and she had Ishmael, and he is known to be the father of Islam, of the Muslim religion ultimately, through, later on through Muhammad or whatever. He is the father, considered the father of that nation biblically. So we see the connection that, these religions have to each other, and their ability to control the majority of the world through war, colonization, disruption of culture, genocide, that still goes on to this very day. That's why it's still relevant, because the Bible sets that foundation for this type of thinking and this type of behavior to occur, because they first overthrew the goddess. Goddess worship in Kemet, which is ancient Egypt. They worshipped the goddess Het Heru for 3,000 years, male and female. The society, because Het Heru is a goddess of intoxication, sex, love, things like that. The kind of stuff that tends to bring people together. Worshiping her was probably one big party. But after her, it became Aset, and she became, what is considered the mother, the queen. She is the wife of Asar. So Aset's also known as Isis. Her husband is also known as Osiris, and they have a son, Heru, who in other mythological stories is the partner of Het Heru. But Asar and Aset were in a battle against Asar's brother Set, who wanted to overthrow him and take over, but that whole story is a story for another time. But as I said, goddess worship existed with Het Heru. She had temples built, that still stand to this very day. Dendera still stands to this day. So the images are on the screen. And then we have Aset. Aset is the original mother, quote unquote, virgin mother. Even though it is through intercourse that she had Heru, but the intercourse was, different. Again, I will be doing that story in the future, but it's not a hard story to find. The Asarian drama is not a hard story to find of how she conceived Heru. Um, these are all spiritual concepts, but and that's another thing with mythology. You look at it as an allegory. You look at it through the eyes um of dissection. Like, you want to dissect, and you want to understand the meaning of it, not just listen to a story and take it at face value, the way that people have been encouraged to do with the Bible. But Aset gave rise to Madonna, the mother of Christ, the virgin mother of Christ, because Aset was the original Black Madonna, and the Black Madonna is an image, is the Black mother of society, of the world, and it is an image that the Catholic Church paid homage to, because a lot of their churches were originally temples of Isis, um, and reworked and repurposed into Catholic churches. And so the statue of the mother, the Black Madonna, still exists. So what was originally the Black Madonna, like colonialism and whitewashing tends to do, ends up becoming the white Madonna, or the Madonna, you know, which is basically the mother in a way, the miss. Um, so anyway, goddess worship was a thing. In Canaan, they had Ashera, which she is the star of this video. Ultimately, this is going to be a story about Ashera, who is the queen of heaven, and is who is directly mentioned in the Bible. Ashera is also known as Astarte, Inanna. She goes by many names, and so we're gonna discuss those names as well throughout this video. So it's really, I'm, super excited to do this video. I've been working on this for a long time, and so there's gonna be a lot of knowledge here. It's gonna be very knowledge heavy. um, for the sake of kind of laying everything out the way it needs to be laid out so that you can understand it. But ultimately, it is those religions, the Judeo-Christian Islamic religions, who have laid the groundwork for women to be subservient through their religious practices and their religious understandings. It is spirituality that sets the groundwork for how people understand the physical world. This is why spirituality is so pervasive no matter what. Even as more people stop believing in the God of the Bible, there's a lot of people who still reach out for some understanding of spirituality. Spirituality to me, um, spiritual is energy. Spirit is energy. Um, is breath, so to speak. Um, life force. So, spirituality is really trying to understand the energy that gave rise to the physical world that we live in. Even all the dense matter that we see are made up of tiny particles called atoms, that are unseen by the naked eye, that have great space in between them. So if you take anything solid in our world and look down at its bare particles, you'll find that, is made of even smaller particles that have large amounts of space in between them. So, once you understand this, you start to question, what is this world actually made of? What is this world? So again, the serpent and Shakti, I talk about that some more, and throughout the course of this channel, I'll be talking about that, my understanding and my viewpoint about these things. Um, and how I got to be where I am based on being critical of the major religions and being very critical of this book of colonialism. If anything, it shows us historically is just the playbook for how to take over an area, rape, steal, pillage, and take everything. But because the God of the Bible does it, it's okay. We can make excuses for it, and that's what we've been doing. But I'm done making excuses. I mean, I've been done making excuses, but as far as this channel, nah, we about to blow all those excuses out of the fucking water. You know, um so yeah, so this is how women in general have gotten the idea that they are secondary and subservient to men in general, and that we must hold men on a pedestal, disavowing our own selves, our own knowledge, our own abilities, bending down so that they can rise up and be the savior and the knight and the prince and the king and all the beautiful, wonderful, heroic things that he can be. And we're just supposed to wash his stuff and cook him some fucking dinner or something like that. This is where this mentality came from. It came from this Bible, and it came from organized religion, and it came from the mentality of these people, what they say, roughly 6,000 years ago is when they start their idea of modern history. Okay, and but we do know that stuff existed before then. So that's really what we want to talk about, really. What existed before then. But in order to truly embrace it, we have to break the psychological hold that religion has over the minds of the average person. Because we see very well, especially in the United States of America, just how much the mentality of the religious and their understanding of spirituality and the world and the physical world that we live in, and who they believe is supposed to have control of that world, is destroying us all by the fucking minute. Okay, and giving power to billionaire quote unquote elites who feel entitled to do whatever the fuck they want to do because they are white males who control this society. Yeah, colonization is a biblically foundational practice. Imperialism, all the things. It sets the foundation. This is the root of the tree. As Yeshua said, a tree by the fruit that it bears. All right. Every tree has a root. We see the fruit that the tree of religion has bared for us. We see it. It's very clear and it's very obvious. We see it. So let's study the roots. Let's study how it got to be what it is. So let's get into it. We are going to start with Genesis chapter 1. Um, this is verse 27. All right. So here we have, so God created man in his image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Okay. So in the first chapter of Genesis, we have the God of the Bible. This God, the word God is actually the Hebrew word Elohim. Okay. Um, the Hebrew word Elohim is found in the Strong's Concordance H430. All right. This word is a plural. All right. It is a plural. So the word God, when it is, you could always look this up. Go to Strong's, what's it called? BlueLetterBible.org. That's where I go in order to pull up the Bible verses, and then you can click a little thing to get the Strong's Concordance, and then it'll show you the Hebrew word. But I'm also going to put it all on the screen, so you don't have to do all that if you don't want to, or you are absolutely free to if you want to double check my sources. But so God, Elohim, the plural God, them, they created man in really their own image. All right. And so it says man, I'm guessing this is mankind, what they are referring to. In the image of Elohim, created he, him, male and female, he created them. So we have male and female being created at the same time in this first chapter of Genesis. So as we move on to the second chapter of Genesis, so starting with in Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, we have another creation. These are the generations of heaven and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord God made the heaven and the earth. So now, God, if you notice in the first chapter of Genesis, the God of the Bible was God, okay, was referred to as God. And we already have discussed that that's Elohim. So in this second chapter, now we have Lord God. Okay, so who is the Lord? The Lord is translated, or the Hebrew word for Lord is, it says here the transliteration is Jehovah, also known as Jehovah. So we have the word for Lord is Jehovah, also known as Yahweh. If you read the Hebrew from the right to the left, as Hebrew is read, you have Yod being, if you look at the characters at the top, you have Yod, that's the Y. You have Hey, Hey, that is another Hebrew letter. Then you have Vav, and then you have Hey. So it is Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. That is the what the Jewish people used to call the unspeakable name. So it got replaced by Lord. All right. But it's also known as Yahweh. I call that God Yahweh. Um there's different there because the original Hebrew doesn't have vowels. There are vowel indicators in this, um, but it doesn't have vowels exactly. So we have the Y, H, V, or WH. Um, so you would have to figure out what those vowels would be in order to actually pronounce it. But we'll just go with Yahweh for the purpose of this video and because that's what I'm used to. So anyway, so now it looks like the Elohim, the plural Elohim, now has Now it's specifying that there is a particular Elohim in control here in this second chapter, in this second creation. There is a particular Elohim that is in control, and his name is Yahweh. All right. So he is the creator from pretty much here on out. Um, so yeah. Even there's even a verse that talks about Israel being Yahweh's portion, which means Yahweh's people. This is, the people that were depicted in the Bible were considered his people, his chosen people. He speaks about it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. He tells the Israelites, or the people of Israel, um, that they are his people, they are his nation. They're going to be a nation above nations. This is his people. So it kind of gives the idea that different that there may have been more than one Elohim. Okay. We have Elohim meaning gods. But you'll see that for Elohim it is translated as God, God, judge, God, goddesses, which of course we're going to talk about later. Great, mighty, angels, exceeding. These are the ways that Elohim has been translated in the Bible. Is through these words down here, down below. So the Elohim being a plural group, we have one in particular who is responsible for the creation as depicted in chapter 2. It is the Lord God, it is Yahweh Elohim. All right. So yeah, so we realize if we go back to Genesis chapter 1 verse 27, we realize that the when he created the genders, male and female, there was not any particular, supremacy among them. Now it is, as our language does tend to be, very male centered, as far as creating a man in his own image, in the image of God. He created him, or created he him, and male and female he created them. So, but at the end of the day, the creation was done at one time. Male and female, they were created at roughly about the same time. But if we move into Genesis chapter 2, in the next creation narrative, we see that on in 2:4, this is where it says, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that Lord God, Yahweh Elohim, made the earth and the heavens. All right. On by verse 7, it says, the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Okay. So so we see man being created as a living soul. The breath was put into him. If we I just wanted to kind of just point out that the word for breath is ruah, and like ruah, or ruach is also pronounced as ruach. Like the ruach kadesh is the Holy Spirit, kadesh being holy, meaning set apart, and ruach is the spirit or the breath, because that is the energy that gives the life. That's the breath, or air is kind of like the element that most of the time gets associated with spirit, which, but I think a little differently. There's a distinction that can be made, but we're not going to get into that because that's not what this video is about. But either way, the ruach is a feminine noun. All right. And as I said, it is usually translated as spirit, wind, breath. Okay. So the ruach had to be given to Adam in order to make him a living being. So that's in verse 7. And then we have to move down, all the way down to verse 22. Okay, because we got him, creating verse 7, we got him creating Adam or man. And then, the rest of this is, I guess, a description of Eden and what ends up happening, a bunch of other stuff, bunch of other stuff, bunch of other stuff. And then we come down to Genesis verse 22, chapter 2, verse 22. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man made he a woman and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Okay, this is very ceremonial in this creation. We have the woman being taken from his rib and formed by Yahweh Elohim and then given unto the man that he created and saying, here is something I'm giving you. She like everything else. You are me in so many ways, you know. Uh so here's your woman. I'm giving you as a help meet to do, I guess, whatever you want with. So my point is that, as ceremonial as this all is, she is clearly a secondary or afterthought to the original creation that Yahweh Elohim had in mind. She is not important to the story in the sense, except for what happens a little bit later. So, but at the end of the day, it took them about 15 verses to from 7 down to 22. It took them about 15 verses to go from creating the male to creating the female, and she is considered like a sidekick, a helpmeet, secondary, lower in supremacy. So already by the second chapter of this book, we already know um what the hierarchy is. It's already laid out clear to you. All right. And then it's going to be laid out clear to you why you should also hate this creation of woman that was just done. So, chapter 1 and 2 seems to, in my opinion, denote two different creation narratives, two different creation stories that are quite different from each other. And one was made and created by Elohim collectively, or this collective plural now. And then next we have Yahweh doing his thing. So I feel like that should be kept in mind. Now, because of this biblical contradiction, the myth of Lilith is born from this. All right. Some of you may have heard there's a saying, be a Lilith, not an Eve, when it comes to women, and saying that we want to be more like the woman who did not submit rather than the Eve who did. So let's talk a little briefly about Lilith and where her idea comes from. According to Jewish mythology, Lilith was Adam's wife before Eve. Over the centuries, she also became known as a succubus demon who copulated with men during their sleep and strangled newborn babies. In recent years, the feminist movement has reclaimed her character by reinterpreting the patriarchal texts that portray her as a dangerous female demon in a more positive light. Okay. So this is going to go on, this Lilith of the Bible excerpt at the bottom is going to go on to say where Lilith came from. Lilith was considered the when it said in chapter 1 verse 27, the male and female he created them. Lilith was considered that feminine counterpart at the time. And it was said that she was supposed to be made to be subservient to Adam, but she didn't want to be, and so she chose to fly off. And because she chose not to go along with being subservient to the male that she was created at the same time with, she was then labeled a succubus demon who copulated with men during their sleep and strangled newborn babies. I'm not quite sure why she was so angry, because I guess she wasn't playing the role that they had meant for her to play. So since she doesn't play her role, she becomes a succubus demon, which is not surprising. You know, a woman that doesn't play the role to be in service of men tend to get a bad rap in this society. So it actually all makes sense. So this is where Lilith comes from, her origin story, so to speak. Um so I mean, I think it's fair that she shouldn't have to submit to someone who she was literally created at the same time as, but you know, who am I to have an opinion? I'm kidding. I have many. So let's move on to how Eve fared, okay? Eve didn't run away. She stayed. She willing to be the wife or whatever. She's willing. So let's see how she fared staying with Adam. We already know that Eve had a encounter with a serpent, okay? There was a serpent in this garden that the God of the Bible created, that Yahweh had created. And the serpent had come to speak to Eve, because they were told that they were not supposed to eat from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, in the midst of the garden. There's a tree of life, and then there's a tree of knowledge and good and of good and evil, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it is from the tree of knowledge, okay, knowledge, that they were not supposed to eat. They were not supposed to be aware of good and evil, I guess. They were told not to eat from the tree. So we have the serpent coming up to Eve in Genesis chapter 3, verse 5. And it says, For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the tree thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. All right. So so yeah. So ultimately we have a tree that was made in a world that was created by Yahweh Elohim, one of the Elohim named Yahweh. And he put that tree there in the garden, but he put it there for the express purpose of nobody eating it. So no matter how long creation was to exist, how many children they had, or whatever the case, nobody was supposed to eat of the tree. He just put it there just for them to see it, but they cannot eat it. All right. It seems like a very tempting God. Okay. So there was a serpent who came and was like, listen, if you eat from this tree, you're going to know what the Elohim know. Remember, the word God in chapter 3, verse 5, and gods are the same God, are the same word. They're the same word. They're Elohim. All right. So what he's saying, the serpent is saying that they are going to be like the Elohim, and they would know good and evil, meaning that they would have a certain level of discernment. Because it seems before they didn't have a discernment. They didn't have a level of knowing what was good, what was evil. They were pretty much like children. They didn't even know they were naked. They were unaware of the world that they had been placed into. So Eve, seeing that, okay, this tree looks good. Okay, it looks fine. And I do want to become wise. I do want to become a little bit smarter. She ate from the tree. She gave some to Adam. He ate too. And then their eyes were open. Okay. So they got a bit more knowledge. So let's look up the word wise. So the word for wise is sakal. Definitions: it means to be prudent, to be circumspect, to wisely understand, to prosper. Okay. And this is, and remember, whenever you're looking at a word, you're not just looking at that word for that one time that it is in that verse. This is all the times that it is translated, how it is translated in the other times. Like, for instance, it'll show you Sakal is translated as understand, wise, prospect, wisely, understanding, consider, instruct, prudent, skill, teach. Okay. So this is what it means. I don't really see any negatives. I see insight, comprehension, to have insight, to have comprehension, to prosper, to have success. So, to become wise, this is tied into having knowledge, is tied into prosperity, is tied into success, is tied into insight. And these are all the things that the God of the Bible didn't want her to have. They did not want her, he did not want her and Adam to be able to know, to recognize, to discern between good and evil. All right. The word for knowledge is doth. All right. And we're gonna talk about that a little bit further. Doth, the concept of doth, which is ultimately the same word as gnosis. Gnosis is just the Greek version of doth. Both mean knowledge. Okay. So, and if you are familiar with the tree of life, you also know that doth is the sphere, considered the missing sphere or the 11th sphere on the tree of life, one of the sephira uh, of the tree of life. Okay. So, anyway, we also know that the word wise is connected also to wisdom. Wisdom is a word, shokma. That is one of the sphere on the tree of life as well. It is one that is just directly on the plane that is directly above Doth. You have Bina and Shokma on those on that plane. All right, and Shokma is the wisdom. So Shokma is also mentioned in Proverbs as I can't remember exactly which verse it was though. But anyway, it was considered the thing that Yahweh had possessed in the beginning when he created the world or whatever. Shokma, wisdom. All right. So going back to Genesis. Oh yeah. Also, Shokma is a feminine noun as well. Shokma is also considered a feminine noun. Anyway, so going back to Genesis. All right, so let's talk about what happened after, Eve went ahead and ate from the tree of knowledge and good and evil, and was trying to get wise, and wanted to know what the Elohim knew, um, and gave it to her husband. So I'm sure that the God of the Bible would be understanding. When he finds out, because apparently, according to the story, he is walking through the garden, just having a good day, whatever, you know, um, and he comes upon them and he finds that they have covered themselves up, okay, which was a dead giveaway because before they were not covered. They didn't even know that they were naked. So they had covered themselves up with the leaves and all the things. And so he was like, what the hell? What happened? And so Adam was pretty much like, hey, like you gave me this woman and she went because of the serpent and she ate off the damn tree. So the God of the Bible, Yahweh, decides to go ahead and hand out some curses or whatever. The serpent has to crawl on his belly, and then Adam has to, he's going to always be at enmity. I think it is enmity with the serpent. And yeah, they're going to be battling or whatever. And so unto the woman, unto Eve, he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. So right here we have where it is officially a thing now that Eve is subjugated beneath her husband, and that she will always desire him, and he's going to rule over her. And when she does bring forth children, she will bring them in sorrow. So childbirth was considered, I guess, a punishment. All right, according to this Bible, this is what they're basically saying in the third chapter of the book, that having babies, having children, just desire to even want a man at all as a woman is a curse. And and he gets to rule over you, and then you get to have children, and but it's going to be a sorrowful occasion. So this is the perspective. Now the thing is, with this kind of book, it has placed itself as the authority over all things, and the go-to. And so this is how we're all supposed to perceive this, this feminine entity that can give birth to children. Is This is a curse. Ultimately, we're supposed to see these children as a curse. And I think ultimately society does, but that's my own point of view. That's my point of view. Children are treated as a curse. They're treated as throwaways of society. They're given a whole lot of lip service, you know as far as how much people care and worry about the children, but in actuality children are often overlooked, dismissed, abused, taken advantage of, etc. you know so anyway, this is the familial structure that the Bible introduces us to, as people who, as particularly people who believe in this and who accept this under this spiritual understanding of the world. The family unit is ultimately cursed. And of course, we cannot forget that the reason that is cursed is because of Eve. Because what a dumbass bitch. How could she? How dare she want wisdom? How dare she want knowledge? How dare you want something that in the rest of the Bible, if we look at the other verses of the Bible where the concept of wisdom comes up, we have here some verses in Exodus. And thou shalt speak unto all that are wise hearted, who I have filled with the spirit of wisdom, that they may make Aaron's garment to consecrate him, etc., etc. A spirit of wisdom. Okay, remember spirit ruach, you know, the ruach, the shokma, you know, the spirit of wisdom. I have filled him with the spirit of God in wisdom and in understanding and in knowledge and in all manner of workmanship. Now, notice these are all, wisdom given to males. I've given him, blah, 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 tribe of Dan. And in the hearts of all that are wise hearted, I have put wisdom. All right. So, wisdom in any other verse is considered a good thing, you know, um, something you would definitely want to have. But when it comes down to Eve, this was something that she was punished for and then subjugated. So I think it's very clear from these verses that the feminine was meant to be, subjugated by the man. And this was the idea from the very beginning. Before Adam and Eve even had any children, it was established that the woman, the feminine energy, would be secondary to the male or the masculine energy in the world that Yahweh has created. Okay. Now, if we recall, there was a world created before Yahweh created his world. There was a world created before, then Yahweh came and created his own world and implemented his own rules. So let's keep it in mind. And I'm gonna say we're gonna keep that in mind because over and over and over, in this world, they try to place this book, these religions as supreme. And this world is always obsessed with finding what is supreme, what is above others. It's very hierarchical in thinking. So there always got to be somebody on the top, and there always has to be a best thing, and there always has to be a supreme thing and some understanding that we're all supposed to go by. And considering that the American society has been hijacked by Christian nationalists, this is their foundational understanding of what they believe the hierarchy is to be. God, then the man, then the woman, then the children, and then we have the fucking umbrella image. If I could find it, I'll put it up here. One umbrella over other umbrellas, and that's basically how you're supposed to view it. And you're just supposed to accept your place in the hierarchy and never challenge it and stay there. Just like when you were in the garden, you are not supposed to eat off the tree of knowledge, because that's the tree that the God that created the world, that subjugates you, doesn't want you to touch. So you're supposed to just be cool with never having knowledge or discernment, you know, um, and just being stupid in his garden to do whatever it is that he intended or whatever. Anywho, so let's move on. Let's move on. Let's get into the main character or the star of the show. Let's talk about the Queen of Heaven. All right. So her name is generally known as Astarte. All right. Um, like I said, she's been known by many names, but in this book, she's particularly known as Asteroth. Okay. And if we look here at her name, it means star. All right. Asteroth, star, the principal female deity of the Phoenicians, worshipped in war and fertility. Also, Ishtar of Assyria and Astarte by the Greeks and Romans. All right. So, also the Phoenicians are, the basically the area that the Canaanites lived. All right, but we'll talk. We'll make the connection to Canaan, because we can't talk too much about the colonialism without understanding Canaan, the Canaanites, the people that came before. Also, I plan to do a whole nother video about biblical racism and the way that they would speak of the African Canaanite people, and why racism is useful, why they speak of them the way that they do, why they are dehumanized. The same reason any other group of people that those people want to destroy are spoken of the way that they are, dehumanized. So it makes it easier to overlook the subjugation. But let's get back to Astarte, all right? Asteroth, all right? Her name means star. I think I've tried to make this video multiple times, and hopefully this is the time that's successful. But in the first video, it was when I noticed that Asteroth is like asterisk, okay? And to this day, asterisk is a star above the number 8, all right? Um, 8 is a number of Ashira, of Astarte as well. So there we have, to this day, this is how much, and in so many subtle ways, that the imagery and the symbolism continues on, generation throughout generation, millennia throughout millennia. The star is still called an asterisk because of Asteroth. All right. Same as the root of the word astrology, the study of the stars. So we can understand this is why she is the Queen of Heaven. And I'll show an image of her, the Canaanite Queen of Heaven, with her crown of stars on her head. Okay. Um, in the Bible, there are 3 verses that mention Asteroth. Okay. You see her mentioned in 1 Kings chapter 11 and Also, 2 Kings chapter 23. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 5, it says, "For Solomon went after Asteroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Amorites." Okay. In verse 33, it says, "Because they have forsaken me and have worshipped Asteroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, Shemash, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, I have not walked in my ways, and have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in mine eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgments, as did David his father." Okay, so Yahweh is mad as usual. He's mad a lot in his Bible. Um, so in this one, he's mad because the people that he's trying to control are still worshiping their original gods. Asteroth being one, Shamash being another, Milcom being another. And this god wants all the worship. I talked about this in another video, a previous video that I made. This god wants all of the worship. He does not like to share. That's why he's called jealous. He doesn't like to share. His whole thing was to become the God of all these nations so that he can gain all of their worship and all of their energy. I guess that was never going to happen. Now, who am I kidding? We know exactly what's happened. We know exactly what this has done. But anyway, so she's mentioned one other time, again with Solomon, who had built, it says the king of Israel had built it for Asteroth, high places, mounds. Okay, so he was making altars to her. All right, and that was making him mad. So now we're talking about Solomon here. If you know about Solomon, the one thing we know about Solomon is that he's considered the wisest man on earth. Okay, he had all, it says here in these verses that all the people came to hear the wisdom of Solomon from all the kings of the earth, which had heard his wisdom. He was known as he was filled with wisdom. All right. So it says, so King Solomon exceeded all of the kings of the earth for riches and for wisdom. Um, so yeah. So this was a very wise man. All right. But this wise man, his, I guess what they would consider a downfall was that he liked the women. He liked the women a lot, quite a lot. And these are the people who were supposedly the ones to take him away from Yahweh and lead him on a path of destruction by worshiping Asteroth, the queen of heaven. All the things that he knew as a wise man, he chose Asteroth. Now, he also had, now how much he loved women. He loved women to some degree. He had 300 wives and 700 concubines. So, he loved women in the sense of he liked to collect them, I guess, as trophies to put on a shelf or whatever. They just kind of maybe sat around with the eunuchs, I guess, who were there to look after them. They probably only seen this man like one time. They probably only had sex with him like once, probably the first time. And then they just sat their ass down with the other women. I don't know, like, for what fucking reason do you need to have 1,000 women around? Like, it really doesn't make any sense. But anyway, whatever the reason, this is what he chose for his life. Okay, he chose to have these women in his life, and these women were worshipers of Asteroth, the goddess, and they led him, I guess, into their practices of worship as well. All right. So, but despite that, he still was considered one of the wisest man on earth. And he was credited for writing Proverbs. All right. So, I don't know, maybe his wisdom had him seeking out that feminine energy. Also, if you recall back when I spoke on the word Elohim, um one of the translations for Elohim in the Bible is goddess. And if you look here, you'll see that Asteroth she was the goddess that was being referred to. So here in a couple of verses, you see Asteroth the goddess, Asteroth the goddess more than once. All right. So that word would be Elohim. So it would actually say Asteroth Elohim, just like in the second chapter of Genesis when it said Yahweh Elohim, which shows you that Asteroth was considered one of the Elohim. She was one of the gods as well. You can see Elohim more like a title, and their name depicting which God they were referring to. So, I mean, when you really think about this, this is the reason why one of the 10 commandments is you shall have no other gods before me. If the God of the Bible is truly the only creator and the only God that existed, then it should be no conversation of any other gods because there just would not be any other gods that exist. That would just be the end of it. But it has to be a commandment, and it has to be one of the most important commandments. Um, because there are other gods and goddesses that exist that had their own nations that they were the principal subject of. All right. And Yahweh had his own nation that he was a subject of, that he was the ruler of, and that was Israel. But he wanted more. He wanted more. He's very ambitious, this one. So here in Jeremiah, we have some verses of the children gathering wood and the father kindling fire, the women kneading their dough to make cakes to the queen of heaven and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods that they may provoke me to anger. That's Yahweh. Yahweh is getting angry because they're doing whatever. They're burning incense to her. They're pouring out drink offerings to her. They're making cakes for her. They're doing all these things, and they when Yahweh brought his people into this into Canaan, when he brought his people here, his goal was to kind of kill the men and the women who were, who had children or whatever, and then to keep the virgins or the young ones, the young girls for himself, and then to, change their worship over to him. That was the thing. So, this is why in his book he has to go really hard like this and say, hey, why are y'all over here worshiping this queen of heaven? Why are you worshiping Asteroth? Why are you worshiping Asherah? You're supposed to be worshiping me. So this is one of the things, like, and these are some of the reasons that he gave when he wanted to enslave the people, his people, or send them into slavery. Particularly, I think it was Babylonian slavery. Part of it was because, he was getting upset with them because they were taking the ways of the heathen, so to speak. He called the heathen the people um, around them, and they were taking on those ways and not worshiping him as he had forced and commanded them to do. And so, he was upset about this, and this is why he would enslave them. Actually, here it go. It says, our fathers, our kings, and our princes in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. So this is Judah. He's referring to the tribe of Judah or the nation of Judah. And this was the same nation that Yeshua or Jesus came from on both sides. So Yeshua, from both sides of his family, was the tribe of Judah, and they were known for worshiping the Queen of Heaven. All right. The Israelites were known to gain a lot of their inspiration from the places where they were allegedly enslaved, just like a lot of their inspiration um, came from when they were enslaved in Kemet, allegedly enslaved in Kemet in ancient Egypt. If you remember, I believe it was Moses who was, well learned in the arts of of um of the court, you know, in Egypt. He was known in the sorcery. In fact, I believe it was he knew what the magicians knew. He knew what the sorcerers knew. Basically, he had their knowledge. He had their spiritual knowledge. Having been somebody who had been raised in that. And so it's kind of interesting how the people who are kind of given authority over the Israelites, um, generally tend to have this in-depth knowledge of the spiritual practices of the place that they're coming from, or that they are, claiming enslave them or whatever the case. So also, Yeshua's family in the New Testament, if you recall, when they were trying to keep him from being killed by whoever that king was or whatever the case, who was trying to kill the infants or whatever, his family went to go run to Egypt. There's a strong connection between Egypt and Canaan because Egypt used to basically own Canaan. Canaan used to be a subject of ancient Egypt for a while, and they were related. They were related in the sense that the Israelites were considered children of Shem. If you recall, Noah had three sons, and his three sons were Shem, Japheth, and Cam. It is known as Ham in our society, but the word is actually Cam. This is the base of Kemet, calm. If you look at the pronunciation in the Blue Letter Bible, Ham is calm. All right, but it's also because that H sound makes a so it's Cam. All right, and so Kemet. All right, the word means hot. All right, and this is the second son of Noah, father of Canaan, and of various peoples which were inhabitants of the southern lands, which is Africa. Okay. In late usage, a collective name for Egyptians. Kim, Kemites. All right, so these are all connected. So, this is why Egypt and 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 Canaan have such a strong. I mean, if you look at where Egypt is located in Africa, you look at where the Arabian Peninsula is and where Canaan is, you will see not very far away from each other. So, that's why I say the feminine goddess worship existed in Kemet and it existed also in Canaan, in that area. This is why they were very tied to Asteroth. All right. So, so the Israelites are the people of this Bible gained a whole lot of their influence and their spiritual practice from Kemet, all right, Egypt, where they were allegedly enslaved, and from Canaan or Babylon, where they were also allegedly enslaved. Meanwhile, they're the ones who's actually trying to subjugate and take over this land and this area. And they ultimately did. But I do believe it is a historical document talking about the movement of these people, of the Semites across different areas and the lands that they are trying to establish themselves within. I mean, they started there just being there, and then, eventually they wanted to grow as a population, and eventually they wanted to establish themselves there and take over that land, and then claim that it was a land that was promised to them by the God of the Bible, the land of milk and honey. It was promised to them, you know. They had a manifest destiny for that land, so to speak, a land that was already inhabited by an indigenous people. All right, before I can go on and talk about Asteroth, I did wanted to also note that the same type of curse that was given to Eve was also so Eve as a woman was given a curse biblically. We already discussed that. There was also a curse given to Canaan, which is really interesting because if you recall the story of Noah, when he had after the 40 days and 40 nights or whatever, and they found the land or whatever, and then he went there and he planted a vineyard. He ended up getting drunk from the wine or whatever that came out of his vineyard or whatever the case, and he was naked. Again, here's another um allusion to being naked in a story where somebody's about to get cursed. So anyway, he's naked or whatever, and in order to cover him, according to the story, it was Japheth and Shem who walked in with their backs turned to cover him, but it was Ham who had initially discovered him naked, and then he went to tell his brothers, and because of that, Ham or Cam became cursed, but the curse went through Canaan, his son. And then his son was said, because of this curse, to have to serve the other nations. So this is the legitimacy that they put to enslavement. This is what they call the curse of Ham. Ham or Cam was not cursed. It was Canaan, his son, who was cursed. And it was Canaan, and if you recall, this is the land that the God of the Bible promised to the Israelites as theirs. It was Canaan who was cursed, okay? And he was cursed to be a servant to everybody else. And so this is where the idea that the Black American slaves are enslaved people, that was the justification for enslaving them, was that Canaan was supposed to be a servant to all the nations. So ultimately is to kind of conflate the people who were brought over on this through this slave trade were supposed to be the children, of Canaan or Canaanites or whatever. And so this is why they deserve to be enslaved. Okay. So again, this book is extremely foundational for a lot of different reasons. Reasons that nobody actually truly goes to uncover. It just gets accepted as the truth and everyone just follows it without question. And but when you really start to uncover it, you just start to see a group of people who were trying to take over a land. And so in order to justify their takeover of the land, they have to demonize the people who were already on the land. Where have we seen this playbook before? Where do we see the playbook happening now? I'll give you a clue. Israel. To this day, it's the same playbook. It's the exact same playbook. They've done it before. All you have to do is demonize and dehumanize the people that you want to subjugate, and then you get everybody else on the side and in participation with the subjugation. Because I need for you to fully understand just how vile this book, the energy of this book, the spirit of this book is, and why it has been able to hold such a strong mental and psychological, because that's really where it starts. When we're talking about spirituality, spirit deals so much with the mind and the consciousness that once you can control the minds and the consciousness of people, the actions are easy. The actions follow naturally once you control the way someone thinks. The way that they act is a result of the way that they think. So, get it in people's head that these people deserve to be lesser than, secondary to, subjugated in some kind of way, and it could continue to the point where now the idea of goddess worship is just considered completely ridiculous, even though the Christians have no problem praying to he, him, their father all day long, while using the double speak idea of, well, no, but we don't actually mean a masculine. We don't actually mean a male. This is not an actual person. Well, you could also refer to it as it, they, them. You could refer to it as anything. I mean, then we have people who don't buy into it at all, who don't refer to any god. There's other choices that could be made. You could refer to she or her, but never, none of those are ever used. Only he and him, because psychologically the connection is already there. Subconsciously the connection is already there. There is no world for them where the feminine holds authority in any way over the masculine, despite the fact that every single male came through this world through a woman, through a female. Every male came through a female. Every, man, what would be a man, came through a woman. But there is no authority spiritually that women are allowed to have. And so that also controls the way that women think and the way that women view themselves as well. And that's exactly what the point was. So we have Asteroth, okay? Now, if you notice, like whenever wisdom is mentioned also in this book, it's also connected to riches and abundance as well. So we recall that Solomon was a very wise king, the wisest man on earth, but his wisdom somehow led him into goddess worship or the worship of Asteroth. All right, okay. And if we look here on the screen, I have her name, Asteroth. She is Phoenician, as I said, that's connected with Canaan, and she is in Babylon, and she is the goddess of love and increase. All right. So if we look at the root of Asteroth, we get Asar, which is interesting. I've already kind of talked about Asar a little bit, but we're gonna separate the god Asar from this here. We have the root of Asteroth is Asar, and Asar says, the definition says, to be or become rich or wealthy, to enrich, pretend to be rich, to be or become rich, to make rich. All right. So the root of her very name deals with riches. So we know that since the root of Asteroth is basically riches, to be rich, what other, entity can you think of, in spirituality that has these same qualities? Love and riches. This would be the goddess Venus. It is the goddess Venus who is connected to the concept of, just like Asteroth, a goddess of love, a goddess of increase, or a goddess of riches. And as I said, the goddess Asteroth or Ashira, because as she is known in in the ancient Sumerian mythology, she is Ashira. And Ashira, her husband, is the African Canaanite god El. All right. And so all the God of the Bible did was take his attributes as a sky god and applied it to himself. All right. Um, there's also a connection there with the god Baal, who was also known or called the Lord as well. So I mean, if you really look in this book, you'll find that this, the God of the Bible, Yahweh, took a lot of his qualities from her husband, from Asteroth's husband, and placed it upon himself. All right. At the time that this all was going on, Egypt still had a lot of control over Canaan and influenced it quite a lot. So you will see, even in Egypt, some of these gods and goddesses, Asherah is also connected with Egypt. It is the land of El and Asherah, the land of Canaan, that the God of the Bible wanted the most. All right. So let's look into her title again a little bit further. Let's look at the word queen. The Hebrew word for queen here um, is pronounced Meleketh. It's, as it says here, is used. We looked at the verses in Jeremiah where it is used for the Queen of Heaven. All right. It says a goddess, identification dubious, which means they're not fully sure, even though the name has already been given. Asteroth is who it's referring to. Um, so it says perhaps Ishtar and Venus. All right. So it says it right here that there's a connection here with Ishtar, Venus to Asteroth. All right, so it says here the Queen of Heaven, to whom the women of Israel pay divine honors, is either the moon or Astarte, i.e., the planet Venus. All right, so we have another connection here to Astarte and Venus. So, like I said, love, increase, riches, all of that is Venus. If you look up Ashira on Wikipedia, you'll find that her title is also Il Alat. All right, she's considered the feminine equivalent of El, and the T at the end, that is something that's pretty common grammatical structure in Kemet, that the feminine deities have a T at the end of their names usually. So we have like Aset, we have Sekhmet, um we have Ma'at. That's one. We have Mut. We have Bast or Bastet. Yeah, they all have T at their names, just like Il Alat. All right, her feminine equivalency of El. And if you look at her titles, often include QDS, Kodesh, which is holy. As I discussed earlier, Kodesh means holy, set apart, and Balat, also mentioned Baal. Balat, the feminine of Balat, of Baal's name, who was Lord. So it really appears that, while Yahweh was so quick to take the attributes of El, one of the Elohim, and the attributes of of him who was a sky daddy, an original sky daddy. He took the title, but he just wasn't interested in having a wife though. It's like he wanted to throw the wife to the side. And it's almost like the people were like, okay, well, don't a god have a wife? Don't a god have a goddess? Isn't that balanced? A god, a goddess, a husband, a wife, a consort. Many of the ancient deities, if you study them, they have a feminine consort. That's not a rare thing. It's actually more rare that Yahweh doesn't. But, Yahweh's name is jealous. So he probably first got jealous of his wife. That was probably first who he was jealous of. And he had to get rid of her, you know what I'm saying? So that he could be the star of the show. So that's what it looks like to me. But I bring these up just to show, if you look just in this little excerpt right here, you just see the connections between um the language of this area. In fact, it is the Canaanite script that gives rise to Hebrew. Hebrew script is nothing but ancient Canaanite script. Okay? Like was their original script. If you look, okay, let's look at the Canaanite alphabet. This is the Canaanite alphabet. We have Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav. Look down here, Yod. And they had the pictograph images, which, if you recall, the pictograph images are also used by Kemet. Also used by Kemet. So we have their pictograph images and then the letters, that correspond here, and the meanings of it. Ox for the head, Bet is a house or inn, like bet. Remember het heru? Bet. So again, the language kind of gives it away. That's kind of why I like studying language, because language gives away a lot of information. You can learn a lot just by looking at the language, looking at the words of something. So anyway, so we have that in, we have the I, all right. Kof resh. All right, so now let's look at the Hebrew alphabet. All right, we don't have the same pictographic images in the Hebrew alphabet, but we have Yod, Tet, Hey, Vav, Dalet, Gimel, Bet, Aleph. All right, and a lot of these correspond to our alphabet. All right, as well as far as the sounds. As I said, the Israelites derived much of their culture from the African, Canaanite, Kemetic, Egyptian culture that existed around them. In the book of Joshua, it shows Canaan being divided among the tribes. All right. So this is pretty much when they were able to accomplish what it was they were trying to accomplish as far as taking over the land. So moving back over to Asherah, some scholars hold that Yahweh and Asherah were a consort pair in ancient Israel and Judah, while others disagree. So at the end of the day, she was here. At the end of the day, Asteroth was here, Asherah was here, and despite all of the writing, rewriting, and editing of the Bible, they were never really able to take her out of it. Just like Christianity has not been able to take her out of it, because her name, Astarte, Esther, Asherah, is all connected to Easter. That's the Christian resurrection day. All right. And her, back in Easter, the reason why, we have the eggs, the bunny eggs and all of these different things. The bunny, the rabbits, what they say, mating like rabbits, or fucking like rabbits, or whatever the case they say, and then we have, of course, the egg, which is a feminine kind of symbolism. The egg, literally, what do we have inside of us? What do they call them? Eggs. All right, this is all feminine symbolism that has been reworked and give it to their Jesus or whatever. All right, taken away from Astarte, taken away from the feminine Ashira, in order to become, you know, masculinized, or whatever the case, as some resurrection story, when really it was a fertility story. It was a story of fertility, which falls under the rim of the goddess more than likely. I mean, the fertility rituals and different things. This is all goddess stuff right here. But another allusion to Ashira are the Ashira poles. She had trees, and these trees, they were called the Ashira poles. All right, and it was considered a date palm, and some, it says that, what does it say here? Some expect living trees, but Olian sees a stylized, non-living palm or pole, the remains of a juniper tree discovered in a 7,500-year-old gravesite in Eilat. Eilat has been considered an Asherah tree. Firstly, we got the name Eilat. We talked about that. 7,500. This predates the Bible. Okay. So this goddess worship was pretty prevalent. He was so bothered that in Jeremiah 10 he says, "Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen, with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold, they fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. They are upright as the palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be born, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, nor is it in them to do good. So, firstly, we have the palm tree here being referred to, as I've already read. That is a symbol of Ashera. All right. And apparently, they were also decorating these trees with silver and gold. They're decking them with silver and gold, keeping them upright with nails and a hammer so they won't move. What what tradition does that sound like? Oh my God, that sounds familiar. To take a tree, apparently they're cutting it down because they have to refasten it with nails and hammers and put silver and gold and decorations on the tree. Sounds familiar. Kind of sounds like goddamn Christmas. It sounds like Christmas. Another hijacked religious practice. Also hijacked from Saturnalia, from Rome as well, but we know the tree part. We get the feeling the tree part might be coming from our favorite goddess to hate. Might be coming from her. Interesting. Let's move on to our Queen of Heaven, Ashera, Asteroth, and her connection to Lucifer. Let's take it over to Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. How art thou fallen from heaven? How have you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How are you cut down to the ground, which did weak the nations? So it's kind of like a taunt here. They're like, how did you fall down? How you get so weak? You know, you were weakening the nations. Now look at you. You done fall into the ground. All right. So what is this issue with Lucifer? First, let's see. Let's check out the word for uh for Lucifer. It translates to Hallel. Okay. Hallel. Interesting. We hear the L in there. So it says Lucifer is a light bearer, the shining one, the morning star. All right. Um it says of the king of Babylon and Satan, which is quite interesting, you know what I mean? Babylon being kind of the offshoot of Canaan or whatever. So referring to the king of Babylon, of Canaan, as Hallel or Lucifer. All right. And Satan, because fuck it. In the Bible, the devil, Lucifer, and Satan is all the same. Hint, it's not. They're not the same, but who cares? Just who needs understanding? The God of the Bible already told us what to think. So we don't need to understand it any further. So yeah, let's look again where we see, because Lucifer, that's the only place that Lucifer ever shows up in this book, one time. And as much as Lucifer is talked about, you would think there would be an entire chapter written on Lucifer. But nope, just one time. So, and since we know that Lucifer is the morning star, all right, let's move on. Where do we hear where's the morning star referred to? The word morning star is referred to in two verses. All right. So we have Revelation chapter 2, verse 28. I will give him the morning star. And then we have Revelation again, chapter 22, verse 16. I, Jesus, have sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David and the bright and morning star. All right, so let's look up this term here for morning star here. So the term morning star says orthros, all right, which says relating to the dawn. And it also says that is an epithet of Venus. Venus. Okay. So the bright and morning star is in actuality Venus. which is connected to Lucifer. You know, Lucifer was the one referred to as the morning star. All right. We look up morning star. We look up the Greek word because this is the New Testament. So this is where the Greek comes in, orthros, and now we get relating to the dawn an epithet of Venus. Okay. So let's look at the word. Actually, orthros is the word for morning. So let's look up the word star. The Greek word star is a stare, a star. Star. All right. Star. Like I said, language is pretty consistent. So that's what I like about language. It's very consistent. So we have the star here. So now keep in mind, the epithet of the morning star was taken in, are referred to back right here in Revelation 22. This is Jesus. He is referring to himself as the morning star. All right, so where we can bring this back around, because it looks like Yeshua or Jesus came in to make the connection of the morning star, of referring to himself as the morning star. And so, in a way, he's kind of referring to himself as Venus, or at least somebody who's aware of this, morning star Venusian way of understanding or way of thinking. If you look up Venus on Wikipedia, it says the ancient Greeks initially believed Venus to be two separate stars, Phosphorus, the morning star, and Hesperus, the evening star. Pliny the Elder credited the realization that they were a single object to Pythagoras in the 6th century BC, while Diogenes Laertius argued that Parmenides was probably responsible for this discovery. Though they recognized Venus as a single object, the ancient Romans continued to designate the morning aspect of Venus as Lucifer, literally light bringer, and the evening aspect as Vesper, both of which are literal translations of their traditional Greek names. So, in no uncertain terms, at least by this time, Lucifer was considered Venus. Lucifer was an aspect of Venus, being a light bringer, bringing a light bearer. And what is light? What is light? What is light often a metaphor for? It's consciousness, it's wisdom, it's awareness. This is why we become enlightened. Okay? This is the light in the darkness when you become aware, when you become conscious of. All right? So it's almost like the Yeshua or Jesus, the Christ figure, is basically saying he comes to bring the light. He's coming to bring consciousness, which was metaphorically shown through waking up people, taking their blindness away, raising them from the dead, bringing consciousness, bringing light to them. Both things connected to Venus. All right. And if you recall, who was the one who went to find the consciousness, went to find the light, went to find the wisdom in the first place? Oh, let's bring it back to Eve. It was Eve who did it. It was the feminine entity who decided that she was going to gather knowledge, that she was going to gather consciousness, that she was going to become enlightened, that she was going to become wise, and she was cursed for it. Now, if you also recall, the Christ figure who has now called himself the light bearer or the enlightened one, who has aligned himself to Lucifer, which thereby also aligns him to Venus and Ashera and Astarte, just like the other wise man in this book, Solomon, who also aligned himself to Astarte, Asteroth, Ashera, whatever you want to call her. She has many names. Inanna. She has many names. You can call her any of the ones. They're all the same, or, similar at least. So it seems that he was also he was crucified as well. Like if you noticed, the end of his story didn't end too well either. After he decided to pursue higher consciousness and pursue the light and pursue the wisdom and the riches, the inner riches at least. All right, so let's go back to Eve though. Where did Eve get the knowledge from? No, her knowledge came from the Nahas, which is the serpent or the snake. All right. So let's look at the root. What is the root of Nahas? The root of Nahas or Nakash, all right? Nakash, which back in the day, because I've been studying this blue letter Bible for so long that I remember when the Nakash was translated as shining one. That's what I recall. But it's different now. Maybe they changed it. Maybe it's a Mandela effect. Maybe it's just me coming from a different dimension. I don't know. But Nakash used to say shining one. Now it says, this is the root for serpent, enchantment, divine, enchanter, learn by experience, diligently observe. The definition: to practice divination, divine, observe signs, learn by experience, diligently observe, practice fortune telling, take as an omen. This is the root of the word serpent. This is the serpent who visited Eve. So the serpent who visited Eve, the root of that word is to practice divination, divine, observe signs, learn by experience, diligently observe, practice fortune telling. It seems that what Eve was visited by was the spirit of divination. She learned how to divine, she learned how to observe signs, probably some astrology, probably a little card reading, a little this, a little that, the stuff that the feminine, the spiritual girlies like to get into today. The things we like to get into today, the things that set a lot of us off onto our spiritual journey. The things that has helped us find knowledge of ourselves and knowledge of our world and knowledge of our society to bring peace, to bring a depth of understanding. This is the things that are now becoming popular today. Cause look, I learned about astrology first when I was 13 years old. This was back in 1995. And not to say it didn't exist, because you have to understand I was only 13. But I'm gonna tell you, the way that it showed up in society was damn near zero. It was a book that was given to me by some girl. Don't even know where the girl came from. We were in 7th grade. She was just a girl at my school for that school year. And she gives me an astrology book. From that point on, I was done. It was the beginning of a new world for me. To this day, still an astrologer. Still an astrologer. And I do chart readings, so if you're interested, hit me up. But my point that I'm making here is that Eve connected to a wisdom, a deeper wisdom, a wisdom that made her self aware, that made her know herself and see herself clearly for the first time. And then she also gave that awareness to Adam as well. And she was cursed for it. Now, again, as I've shown you, the efforts and the lengths that the God of the Bible went to erase the goddess worship and the feminine spirituality away from his people and from that land that they were taking over. Would it be quite a surprise that these practices were already in place as part of their, spirituality? Just as a lot of women are waking up to spirituality today and are moving toward tarot readings, oracle readings, readings of all kinds, astrology, meditation, observing, journaling, learning by experience. This is what the serpent was offering Eve. This is what the serpent gave Eve. And it's clear that there's a tradition an underground tradition that continued all the way until we get to Yeshua. Okay, but I got more. I got more. All right. Okay, so we also know that Yeshua was visited by Magi, when he was born. So let's get into that. The because like I said, there's a little tradition here that seems to be carried on, and somehow Yeshua got caught up in it. Somehow Yeshua came to refer to himself as a light bearer, came to refer to himself as Lucifer, as a Venusian, a worshiper of the goddess. All right, but when he was born, all right, now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is he that is born, King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. All right, so let's look at that word wise men. Who are the wise men? All right, that word comes from the Greek word magos. Magos. Okay, so a wise man would be, magus, as it says here. Wise men would be magi. Okay, that because in Latin the plural is indicated usually with an I at the end. All right, so just like alumnus, alumni. All right, so a magus. What does it say here? So we have a name given by the Babylonians or Chaldeans, the Medes, the Persians, and others to the wise men, teachers, priests, physicians, astrologers, seers, interpreters of dreams, augurs, soothsayers, sorcerers. Okay, so he was visited by some sorcerers, some magi, some magic workers. Magic, magi, imagination. These are all connected words. All right, astrologers, a seer, second definition, the Oriental wise men, astrologers who have discovered by the rising of a remarkable star, so they were observing the stars in the sky, the signs in the sky, that the Messiah had just been born, came to Jerusalem to worship him. And it also says a false prophet and sorcerer because it's the Bible. Why wouldn't it? So, anyway, oh, wait, hold on. We got this at the bottom. Da, 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 da. A magician, sorcerer, wise man. Okay. Okay, so that's who came to visit the Christ. You know, somebody with the knowledge of astrology, of divination, of seeing, all of that stuff. One of the first people to come after he was born. Keep in mind, there's a lot of wisdom that you can observe from the movement of the stars and of the planets. It's kind of like the creative forces created those as signs. As it says in the first chapter of Genesis, the Elohim placed them there for the purpose of signs. Okay, so that you can kind of understand what's going on. Night, day, seasons, of course. We know. But it's also for other signs. And as an astrologer, I would concur. As a person who follows the feminine spirituality, the feminine way, the feminine ancient tradition, absolutely, signs are everywhere. But one nice and quick way is go ahead and get you learn a little bit about some astrology. It'll show you something. It'll tell you something about yourself, who you're programmed to be in this reality that we're in, and how you can free yourself from that program. And it could also tell you the programming that the rest of the society is under as well. Okay. So yeah. So it's no surprise that that Lucifer has also been demonized. Um because it seems to have a connection to Venus. It seems to have a connection to Asteroth, to Ashira, you know, wisdom and riches. It just seems to be what that is. All right. And you know, and she ends up losing her prominence and she ends up losing her position within the society that she had created, or that, that had created her. All right. Um, so let's look at this article I found. This is an article that talks about the Canaanite El and Hallel. All right, because if you recall, Lucifer, the Hebrew word for Lucifer was Hallel. So it says the fall from heaven motif also has a parallel in Canaanite mythology. In ancient Canaanite religion, the morning star is personified as the god who attempted to occupy the throne of Baal, and finding he was unable to do so, descended and ruled the underworld. The original myth may have been about the lesser god Hellel trying to dethrone the Canaanite high god El, who lived on a mountain to the north. And it says Herman Gunkel's restruction of the myth told of a mighty warrior called Hellel, whose ambition was to ascend higher than all of the other stellar divinities, but who had to descend to the depths. It thus portrayed as a battle, the process by which the bright morning star fails to reach the highest point in the sky before being faded out by the rising sun. Okay. It's a couple myths found in there. Firstly, we have the god El, okay? And this is a story about Hellel trying to dethrone him, kind of like Set and Asar, um, where Set was trying to dethrone Asar or whatever, but he failed to do so. All right, so I guess this is where he's brought low, and there's an allusion to that in that verse in Isaiah 14 that talks about Lucifer, talks about, being brought down or whatever. Also, if you recall, people talk all the time about this story about Lucifer, being jealous of God, because he was the brightest, he was like one of the best angels or whatever, the most beautiful angel or whatever, and had this musical talent. But because he was jealous of the God of the Bible, that, he waged war and was cast down to earth as a result of this or whatever. And one thing I always ask is like, where is this story in full depicted in the Bible? I ask Christians that. They never have it. Of course they don't, because they really don't know the origin of their own religion at all. At all. I mean, you would first have to read the book to know the origin, and they don't even do that. So anyway, so I always ask them where it is, and then they give me the verse in Isaiah, and they give me the verse I believe it's in Revelation, where it's the cast down, the serpent was cast down, and they called him Lucifer and all this other thing. I think he was called Lucifer there, because there's also that only, and anyway, that's not. But the point is, when you look at this story though, you see the whole story there, and it's just laid out. It seems like the story came from a prior mythological story from Canaan about Hellel, Lucifer, trying to dethrone the Canaanite god El. And he was sent to the underworld to rule there because he was unable to do so. Again, another stolen story, another stolen mythology. But the traits are now taken away from the original God and given to the God of the Bible, Yahweh, who wants to prop himself up as the only God that exists. Yet, despite the fact that he's the only God, his mythology is not original. It can be traced back to the original culture, Black African culture, that it usurped its stuff from, and then made them the slaves of everybody else after they stole everything from them. Now they want to justify making all Black people the slaves of everybody because of some fucking story about Canaan. About Canaan being cursed. The Bible shows you why they choose to curse and dehumanize certain people. And so far, it seems like the curses are for those who seek knowledge Those who question and don't take the original story, they seek knowledge, they seek light, consciousness, awareness, wisdom, they're cursed or sacrificed. Or if you just so happen to be the child of the people that they're trying to basically overthrow and get rid of, then you're cursed there too. And then everybody goes to follow this Bible, particularly black people in America, black people in general, some of the biggest followers of this fucking book. Some of the biggest followers of this book, some of the biggest proponents and supporters of this book are the black people that this book seeks to subjugate. And I'm going to tell you, it's particularly race and culture driven. Always remember though, spirituality is so important because it colors the way that you see, understand, and interact with the world. It's what gives you your values, it's what gives you your knowledge, and it conducts how you behave in the world. So it is a problem that the people who face the most subjugation in this world, black people, women, are directly and expressly denigrated in this book, and that those people are the biggest followers of this religion. What you give your energy to grows. What you give your energy to thrives. This is an energetic universe. One thing I really want to really kind of get into so much on this channel is just how much everything is energy. The first law of the Kabbalion, the universe is mental. Mentalism is the mind that creates the reality. And I've been noticing on threads lately that quantum physics has been trending, which is nice. I'm glad that it's trending. But without truly understanding how much what you think just on a day-to-day basis affects your reality, it that's all the quantum field is all about, is determining your reality, determining what it is that you want to see, and having that manifest or having that come to be, or having that be the reality that a particle takes, whether it chooses to be a particle or be a wave. um but again, I don't want to get too far off with the topic. But my point is, in bringing all of this together, is that the stuff that's in this book is not for nothing. It was written in this book for a reason, even if it just depicts the mindset of those who actually wrote the book. It depicts exactly what they value, who is where on the hierarchy, how you're supposed to behave, especially as a subjugated people who believe in this book. This is why you have the verses that say that you need to you know believe in the authority of your master. Your master was given authority over you by, the God in heaven. So therefore you're supposed to accept their authority without question and allow them to rule over you. And if you won't accept authority without question, then you will be cursed, you will be punished. This is the prevailing message. And whether you think it consciously affects you, it does, especially if you are a believer, especially if you still believe in this stuff. If you're not a believer, then this is just a little knowledge that you could put in your cap, but if you are a believer in this, then you really need to sit here and decide, are these your values? Do you actually want to conduct a life where, these people are subjugated to you? Because I could tell you exactly who this would benefit. I could tell you exactly who will want to keep these values prevalent in the minds of the people of this world. I could tell you exactly who it benefits. It's definitely not black people, and it's definitely not women. So you could figure it out from there. Who does it benefit? Who's currently running shit? Who does it benefit? It is very important, and I think I've stressed it enough in this throughout this video, but it's very important that we have a grasp and an understanding of what it is that we claim to believe, that we understand it to the depths of which that we can, you know, and if you are willing to accept the ugliness that can be found in the historical understanding of your religion, then I think you need to be prepared to explain why this is all okay. Because to me, it seems like the consensus decision that our society has made that an authority figure gets to do whatever they want to do unquestioned because they're better, above, greater than you. And so they can go around unquestioned and unchallenged and make the laws and make the decisions for all of us where our collective money is going to go, who we're going to fund, who we're not going to fund, what other lands and what other places that we are going to support, which other places we're going to destroy and colonize. You know, these people get to decide based on some files that were released what children they want to take and what they want to use those children for and how they want to use those children. They get to decide everything about your life, pretty much. And you're forced to abide by laws that don't apply to them. And because they've made themselves the authority or they have asserted their idea of supremacy, that you're just supposed to accept it and take it. And then I guess put your head in the sand while you wait for Jesus to return to save you because you don't give a fuck about saving yourself. You don't care to do that. It would just be too much time to do the research and to learn the history of things and to develop compassion or empathy for others, or you know, or to even develop any self-respect, because while you accept the hierarchy, you also accept your place in the hierarchy, which means that you would accept the subjugation that comes to you for accepting your place in the hierarchy. But I think that if you are aware of what the fuck I talked about throughout this whole video, and you understand, you follow me, you get it, then I think you're also aware that it's very important that you are knowledgeable and that you give this knowledge to whatever degree that you can. So if you don't have the words to say and you don't have the knowledge behind you, feel free to share my videos. Feel free. We're the light bringers, we're the torch bearers, we are the seekers, we're the knowers, and we have a responsibility. And so this is me doing my part. So anyway, meet me again on the next video. I'm not sure what my next video is going to be, but I cannot wait to see you there. And yeah, if you're interested, in receiving a reading, a natal chart reading, a past life reading, or karmic, well, actually, it's a karmic past life reading, hit me up. The information is in the description box. All right. Thank you for listening. Peace.